bringing to you interesting guests to inform you on topics that affect us all. Operation 7570 is one of the longest-running radio programs of its type. It's been on the air since 1967 and brought to you by Apex Bank of Camden. 3 locations in Camden, Big Sandy and Brewston. Today's program, after this.
Apex Bank of Camden is getting ready for the 15th annual Easter egg hunt. That's right, it's West Tennessee's largest Easter egg hunt on Saturday, April 8th at 11 a.m. at the Briarwood School Field. There will be over 10,000 eggs, lots of prizes, and the Easter Bunny will be there. Don't miss it, folks. Bring the kids ages 2 to 8 to Apex Bank's 15th annual Easter egg hunt, Saturday, April the 8th at 11 a.m. at the Briarwood School Field. Happy Easter, everyone, from Apex Bank. Apex Bank, building stronger communities together. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Very nice.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome this morning to Operation 7570 on this first day of April. Sun is shining and the wind's up a little bit, but I think it's going to be a much, much nicer day. The storms have passed through us, thank the good Lord, and I think we come out of there as well as we could under the circumstances. Of course, a lot of people are suffering this morning throughout the South, maybe over in the Middle Tennessee, west of us, I think, around Covington or some damages down there, but we want to remember those folks this morning, and we appreciate everybody for bearing with us this morning as we're on the air a few minutes late, but that's okay. But I have a room full with me today, a room full of longtime friends, and today we're going to be talking about our friend Ron Lane. Ron, as you know, a 60-year veteran of Camden radio, both at WFWL and WRJB. Ron passed away on March the 12th, and the memorial service for Ron is going to be tomorrow at 2 p.m. at First Baptist Church on Post Oak Avenue here in Camden. And today, to reminisce and tell stories and share memories of our longtime friend and what he meant for local radio, I have his brother, Randy Lane. Randy Lane, who started at the old studios in his wonderful career in broadcasting. Randy, the brother of Ron, is with us today. Buddy Smothers, you know Buddy Smothers, of course, and Betty Greer. Betty Greer started out WFWL. Was that your first work experience at old studios?
I was 17 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Of course, Betty now at the Benton, down at the United Co-op. United Co-op it is.
United
And okay. And minister down at Mount Carmel. Okay. We'll be talking about that. But friends, welcome. Thank you so much for getting up on this Saturday morning to share memories. And Randy, on behalf of all of us, and to you and Sue and Pat, of course, your entire extended family, we still extend our thoughts and prayers to you and all the family. And gosh, you know what Ron meant to all of us in this room and what he meant to local radio. And
Well,
God
thank
bless
you so much, Flash. I appreciate that, and thank you for having me this morning.
Well, we appreciate it then, and of course, you know, we've had all sorts of tributes up on Facebook, other social media to come in over the last 3 weeks talking about Ron and what all he meant. He touched a lot of lives, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Absolutely. And you did a wonderful article in the Chronicle, too, about Ron that really outlined his beginning and all the way through his 60 years on the air.
Well, I appreciate that so very, very much. I was glad, you know, it was a way for me to share some of the experiences I had with him, of course, but you wanted to bring in another segment of the population, and I hope I accomplished that. Just so many, many things we can talk about Ron this morning. But let me ask you this. He started your career in broadcasting, and you worked in different markets, spent a lot of time on the West Coast, so people may not be as familiar with you as they are with Sister Sue, Pat, of course, and Ron, but what is the background of Randy Lane, and what did he mean to you, not just as a brother, but to get your career started?
Well, you know, what's funny is that when I first got into college, people would ask me, well, what do you want to do when you get out of school? And I said, you know, I'm not sure, but I know I don't want to be in radio because that's what my brother is doing.
Never say never.
Yeah, exactly. But then after my first year in college, in the summer, Ron gave me a job at WFWL. And I'm like, wow, this is kind of nice. I like this. And so I was kind of bitten by the radio bug at that time. And, you know, I started out running a religious and public affairs program on Sunday morning and that sort of thing. But then one day, one of my responsibilities was to air this program that ran an afternoon drive called Our Changing World with Earl Nightingale. And I was kind of nervous, I was like, ooh, I got to crack the mic and I got to introduce this program. So I introduced the program, and at that time, the show came in on a record, on an album disc, And so I queued it up, I introduced the program, and it was the end of the show. It said, "You've just heard Our Changing World with Earl Nightingale." So I got really nervous, and I dragged the needle across trying to get, and I was like, shaking like that. Got the previous day's ending of the program again. Now, at this point, sweat's popping out of my head and everything. To finally get it on there, start the program. And we had a telephone in the studio. There was this red telephone we called the hotline. A minute later, it rings. I'm going, "Oh no, I know it's going to be Ron calling me." He goes, "What in God's name are you doing?" And I said, "I don't know what I'm doing. All I know is I'm screwing everything up." And he goes, "Oh, you're gonna be okay." He said, "Calm down, take a deep breath, and just outro the program when it was over." So that's how I got my start in radio. And then I said, "You know what? I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to major in radio, TV, and film." And so I went to Memphis State. They had a campus radio station there. And during the time I was in college, I started to work for a pretty famous personality who Ron always loved too in Memphis. His name was Jack Parnell. And he did a morning show on WHBQ there, but he hired me to do weekends there on WMC AM, and that's sort of where I got started, and went on from there. And I've had the pleasure of working in places like Washington D.C., Chicago, and then lastly in Los Angeles.
Yeah, and ultimately into radio consulting, and you've crossed paths with many famous people in that world out in Los Angeles. A different world out there as compared to Big Sandy in Camden, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Another thing I was fortunate for is that I worked with a guy named Jimmy Kimmel. Now, this was...
Heard of him?
Yeah. Now, this was in 1993, and at that time I was working for another consulting company in Washington, D.C., and I got a call from this general manager and program director to say, "Well, we got this new morning show in Tucson. It's Mike and Jimmy, but there's a guy named Jimmy Kimmel." No one knew who he was at that time. He said, "He's really funny, but we're getting a lot of complaint calls on him. And so we want you to come out, do a workshop with these guys for a couple of days, and tell us if you think we should keep the show or just cut our losses and get a new show." I said, "Okay." So I went out there, spent 2 days with these guys. Jimmy was a great guy, very genuine guy, and I'm like, this guy is really funny. And so at the end of the 2 days, I met with the GM and the program director, and they said, "Okay, well, what's your decision? What do you think we should do?" And I said, "Well, I think you should keep these guys. They're going to be great, especially this guy, Jimmy Kimmel. I think is going to be a star in Tucson." Now, at that time, I never thought about him going on from there. Dead silence in the room. Well, long story short, they fired Jimmy, and then they fired me. But we had always remained friends, and I would see Jimmy, every year or two. I would go to his show, and he would invite Joanne and I backstage afterwards to say hello. Great guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to get to Betty in just a moment, but you mentioned Jack Parnell, of course, in Memphis. He's a member of the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame. You were there at the banquet a few years ago. We had Ron up there, and people may not know the name as such, but I'm sure they've heard him. He's been on voiceovers. He was the voice of Bill Dance Outdoors. He did Dollar General commercials. He's got a famous son, a young man by the name of Chris Parnell,
That's right.
who was a regular on Saturday Night Live and has been in many, many movies.
Yes, he has, absolutely. And then another young man, when the last program director job I had before starting my business was in 1995 at Star 98.7 in Los Angeles, and this young man came in and he wanted to do weekends. His name was Ryan Seacrest. And he said, I've got this TV show that I'm doing, and it's called Junior Gladiators, but I've been doing radio in Atlanta, and I'd like to keep my foot in radio. And I said, okay, great. So he comes in, and I said, well, you've been doing some radio in Atlanta, now you got this TV show. I said, are you more interested in radio or television? He took a deep breath. He said, I want to be a star in radio, and I want to be a star in television. My goal is to be the next Dick Clark. And I'm thinking at that time, well, good for you. You know, he was 20 years old at that time, and I said, well, that's great that you have those kind of ambitions. And I hired him to do weekends, and then a couple of years later, I had left the station to start my business, and they moved him from weekends to overnights to afternoon drive, and he was on afternoon drive with a young woman named Lisa Fox. And then they brought me back in to coach that show for about 5 years. So,
Well, Betty, you started out at old WFWL down in the Lockhart cottages down on South Forest Avenue. Your experiences and how you got involved with radio at an early age.
I came out of high school in May, and I went to work at the radio station in July, knowing nothing. And I know if you know me now, it's hard to believe, but I was so shy and so bashful, so backward. Just leave me alone, let me do my work. That didn't work. Ron is the consummate teacher when you don't even realize he's teaching you. And they got me to doing anything and everything in that station. Back at the time, you had to have a broadcast license. And I even had to go take the test and get the license as a backup, so that if we had a young guy on the radio or a young lady on the radio that just had the permit, or the permit had run out and they hadn't gotten their license, that we had somebody in the station that had a license. So Judy Doherty and I both went and got our licenses, and worst test I ever took. Don't ever want to take another one like that. But I was there till 79, and Mike and Ron taught me so much. I owe them a lot. They always encouraged. They were teaching when you really didn't realize they were teaching. They let you know what they expected and how we were going to get it done, and just so supportive. It was like a family. I mean, it wasn't a business. It was a business, very much a business, but it was a family. They treated me like I was one of their kids. And of course, Ron was the age of my oldest brother, and Randy is the same age as my brother next to me, and I got one in between, and then I've got a younger brother. And so it was like, that's why you felt. You knew you were being taught, you knew you were being trained, you knew you were doing your job, but you also knew that you were being nurtured and cared about, and it was a good thing.
And one thing about it, Randy pointed this out a while ago on the Earl Nightingale story right there. Even when Ron was not in the studios, you never thought you could get away with something because he was always listening. And when you saw that hotline ring, you knew you was in trouble.
We got away with something one time, you and I and Terry Hudson.
No, surely
Yes,
not.
we did.
No.
Yes, we did. Now, the car club, Antique Car Club, was Bob Craig was the head of that at the time, and they were going to have a parade, and we were supposed to have it on the air on a Saturday morning. And Ron said, "Don't forget it, because it's at 10 o'clock." Well, we had a pastor and his wife and a lady that took a request. They were doing a live gospel show, and so I was watching, and you all had everything ready. You was trying to get one more thing done before it happened, and I was watching out the door. I was going out the sidewalk, walking out the door, and just all of a sudden I heard the cars coming with the horns blowing, So I ran back in, got you all. We all got on the sidewalk, and the last car went by. I don't think there was but 3. And we kind of looked at each other and said, "Oh, what are we going to do now? We can't have nothing on the noon broadcast because Ron will be listening." I don't know who came up with the idea, but what we did was we got the pastor's wife, we got the lady that was taking requests, and I got in our cars, pulled them up out front, and we started honking the horns. Like we was going by. We'd rotate those horns. And here Flash and Terry were standing there on the sidewalk recording like the parade was going by right there. We said, this is our secret. We're never going to tell it. And I don't think any of us worked full-time at the radio station then when we finally messed up to it.
Ron actually called after he heard the recording on the news.
How good it was.
Ron called and said, "Boy, that's the best parade broadcast I've ever heard." We kept it that way, and I think we ended up telling him that at a Christmas party.
Yeah, years later.
That's right, that's right.
Now, that was theater of the mind.
No, that was a matter of necessity.
That's
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Our jobs.
Yeah,
Our
keep it
jobs.
on the fly.
Yeah. Well, buddy, of course, you know, when the station, WFWL, moved up here, Ray and John bought the station, brought the studios up here in the room where we're broadcasting from right now, you and I started doing Brewston and Hollow Rock football games, basketball games, but your association, you had an association with Ron back at the old studios down at Lockhart's motel buildings.
Yeah, I started at Hollow Rock Brewston in 76 Flash. I was at Munford 2 years and got to come back home in 76. I was the head boys basketball coach and I was the head junior high football coach. So I'd come in, you know as well as you interviewed Julian Nunnemaker and I a bunch of times. John Bucky and his staff would be coming out and Julian and I'd be coming in, and we all had a great time in there then. But I go back to that point and did a lot of shows there, basketball shows, football shows and all. You come over to Central and interview me and Tommy Cruz and Julian Nunnemaker would always get involved in it, wouldn't he?
Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, Randy can recall this, and Betty can too. There was a time in the 60s, Ron would go out and he would do broadcast. He would do sports broadcast, as a matter of fact.
Tell you a story about Ron. He was talking about Hollow Rock Brewston, the old football stadium. And Ron said, you know, we wanted to do a football game one night. And said they had the press box nailed to a pole. He said, so we climbed up a ladder and got up in that press box. But he said it was mounted to a pole. We were doing a ball game in a pole up there. And I thought about that. You and I have done a lot of ball games, a lot of different places. I don't think we ever did one from a pole before.
Most interesting, most interesting. Randy, as a family member, give us a little history. We all know how Ron got involved with broadcasting, but what's the early history of Ron in broadcasting? How did he first become involved with the studios with WFWL back in the day?
Well, he was a senior in high school at Big Sandy High School in 1959. And I know Russell Gallimore, I think, had been involved with some sort of a career day at the high school, and Ron went by and wanted to get involved with radio, and Russell thought, wow, this kid's got a really nice resonant voice, even at 17, I guess he was, in 1959, and he started calling in Big Sandy news reports at WFWL on the phone from home, and then I think later that summer they gave him a part-time job when he had graduated from high school, and that's when he started right there in his career. And Ron was, personally, I have to say that Ron's life was really one of triumph over tragedy. And in 1950, just before his 9th birthday, he contracted polio. Now, that was 5 years before the vaccine was available in the United States, and he started with a body cast, then to a wheelchair, then to crutches, braces, and eventually walking when he was in high school. And the amazing thing about Ron was not once in my entire life did I ever hear him complain about his handicaps. Not once. And the other thing, too, is that he was born right-handed, but he had partial paralysis in his right hand and had to switch to become left-handed. So, he had a lot of things that he overcame, but he always had a very, very positive outlook.
And here's the thing as well. And of course, we've always associated Ron with living in Big Sandy, of course, and his time in Camden, Benton County, of course. But actually, the Lane family, did they move to Big Sandy when your dad involved with the railroad and the family moved from Kentucky to Big Sandy? Is that right?
Well, I was born in Paris
Okay.
and then grew up in Big Sandy, but Ron and Pat were both born in Auburn, Kentucky, because my dad he worked for the L&N Railroad, the Louisville and Nashville Railroad, and so he had moved around quite a bit, but settled in Big Sandy, and that's where, I went to Big Sandy School the whole time that I was growing up, and I think Ron and Pat were very young, maybe 3 or 4 years old, something like that, when they moved to Big Sandy. Yeah.
Beyond radio work, what was Ron like as a brother, as an older brother?
I got to tell you that Ron, to me, was not only a brother, but he was a mentor and a friend. When I was 8 years old, Ron decided he was going to teach me to play baseball. Now, he was a very avid baseball fan, loved the New York Yankees, watched every Yankee game he could that was on television. But I was 8 years old. This was the summer of 1957, and believe me, it was not an easy job. 5 minutes after we'd be out there, I would start whining, "I hate baseball. It's too hot. I want to be playing with my friends," or whatever. But Ron stuck with it. He was very patient. And despite my lack of enthusiasm, when I would do something good, he would encourage me and applaud me and say, "Good job, good job." Well, he stuck with me, and 3 years later, I became an all-star Little League baseball player and used to play in Camden, right behind the elementary school. That's where the Little League games were, and he also broadcast play-by-play games back there as well.
Yes.
But he was he was a very positive, encouraging person, and just never complained about anything during his whole life.
And
Yeah.
he had opportunities. He could have gone. We did go far in this business, as we well know. But
Yeah.
hey, he could have been in other markets. No doubt. I mean, he had offers in other markets, but always wanted to stay close to home.
He did. He had offers in a lot of other markets. And, besides being on the air and doing morning shows, delivering news, play-by-play sports, interviewing, all of the local and state people, leadership people in business, politics, sports, education, and everything. He also became owner in several radio stations in Florida, Illinois, Alabama, and other places, in Tennessee as well. But yeah, he had offers to go to a lot of bigger markets, but he always wanted to stay, I think, close to home, and he did an amazing amount of positive things for the communities of Camden, Big Sandy, Holiday, for the whole county.
Yeah, the office up here is just, proclamations and plaques in there, recognition from different groups and organizations, and it speaks well. And so many things he emceed down through the years. You
Yes,
name it,
he did.
he emceed it. I mean, it might have been down at the fair. It could have been a Fairs to the Fair pageant. It could have been a wrestling. I think he emceed some wrestling announcers at wrestling, things like that, and concerts, of course, school events, you name it. He emceed those. And go ahead, Betty.
Well, another thing he did, he had a heart for the people, and we did the Heart Association broadcast raising money. He loved things like that. We did the American Cancer Society before they started doing the relays. And anything came up, the air belonged to the people that had the need. And he loved it. He was a consummate teacher. And the people around the court square, I remember when we would be, lots of times I'd have to go pick up ad copy for him. They wouldn't have it ready when he would go get it. And he would say, I need to record this stuff. Can you run uptown and get so-and-so? So I would. And those people thought Ron Lane hung the moon. I mean, they loved him. He loved them. It was such a wonderful, good feeling. It was a nice way to grow up.
Yeah, and back in those days, he would have sales calls, and you had to update copy from the merchants, as you well know, and he would just, Mike and John in those days, they would just visit the different merchants up on the square and elsewhere, and he would just like to go in, and of course, a lot of times, you're not going to get the merchant you're dealing with to do an ad on the radio,
Right.
but he just liked to stop in and visit with them, and
Yeah.
the merchants appreciated that.
Hey, we're here. If you need us, come see us.
Yeah.
And he was, and when he'd get the ad copy, he'd bring it back to the station, and sometimes he would write it off. And then there was other times he would sit on the corner of my desk and dictate it, and I'd type it.
Back in the old days, yeah, I remember him back at the studios and up here and setting Vicky, where he would just think, off the top of his head what to put in, into the copy.
You just start rolling.
Yeah. Well, buddy, you can certainly relate to the sports that Ron loved. He loved the New York Yankees. Y'all had a common interest in that, of course. And when the Titans came to Nashville, the Oilers, first of all, I mean, the sales pitch that Mike Keith and Larry Stone had to make to him, he was a little reluctant. He didn't know. But, hey, that turned out quite successful, and those people are very appreciative of the association with WFWO, WRJB.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Flash, but we were the first station to sign over the Titans.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we were ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, Larry Stone sent me a note to that effect a couple of weeks ago.
And you're correct. It was we didn't know. It was kind of a shot in the dark, to be honest with you. Tennessee was booming at the time, and we had Bandy on WRJB and Tennessee on WFWL. And he kind of, like you say, he was kind of reluctant. And everybody's sitting there now thinking it's a no-brainer. But he took a little courage to step out like he did. But I always take pride in the fact that this station was the first one to tied in for him, the Nashville stations did.
Exactly. And of course, he listened to our broadcast on Friday nights. He listened to our basketball broadcast, and he let us do our own thing. But made suggestions, of course. Sometimes we listened, sometimes we didn't. But anyway, he pretty well let us do our own thing.
Yeah, he would. He listened in, he'd let you know. And Charlie Baylor told me years ago, said, Buddy, you need to tape yourself and listen to yourself every so often, just to pick up if you've got mannerisms, annoying mannerisms or anything. And Ron would say, Bud, you need to get the scores in more. You need to do that. You need to do this and the other. I had 3 teachers up here. I had you, I had Charlie, and I had Ron. Because when I got in here, as I told you, and you and I started working together, I knew nothing about radio. Now, sports I had, but I knew nothing about radio. So you 3 really taught me a whole lot. Ron was you wouldn't find a better man.
No.
I think you talk about everything in the world, but you get down to, I mean, he was a good man. You would meet a better man, and that's the epitome of everything.
Tim Priest from Huntington, Tennessee, and I'll get back to you in just a minute. Tim Priest from Huntington played football, played at UT, was on the broadcast for many, many years with Bob Kessling up there. Tim has told us, we've interviewed Tim on the radio,
Yeah.
Tim told us he used to listen to Vol broadcast on WFWL before Huntington had a station, and so, that's a great reflection of what we were doing in those days, Randy.
Yeah, besides Ron mentoring me, he really took a lot of people under his wings, including you, Flash, I believe, and Terry Hudson, and then today Luke Crutchfield and Dylan Pauly. I mean, he's been influential in a lot of people's life, and he's had a compassionate heart and always wanted to help people. Yeah. And that's really a big part of his legacy, for sure.
No question about that. Well, I tell you, time's getting away from us, and we need to break for another long-time sponsor of this program. Operation 7570, Bank of Camden, now Apex Bank. What a great association that Ron had with all the personnel down at the bank. And so let's have a break right now, and for this message from Apex Bank, we'll be back. Stay with us.
Apex Bank of Camden is getting ready for the 15th annual Easter egg hunt. That's right, it's West Tennessee's largest Easter egg hunt on Saturday, April 8th at 11 a.m. at the Briarwood School Field. There will be over 10,000 eggs, lots of prizes, and the Easter Bunny will be there. Don't miss it, folks. Bring the kids ages 2 to 8 to Apex Bank's 15th annual Easter egg hunt, Saturday, April the 8th at 11 a.m. at the Briarwood School Field. Happy Easter, everyone, from Apex Bank. Apex Bank, building stronger communities together. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
For more than 85 years, Apex Bank of Camden has built a tradition of local people serving local people. Although there have been changes over the years, this one thing remains the same. Hometown people that are your friends serving you every day to meet your financial needs. We want to see you grow and prosper. And when you ever have a need, you'll get personal attention right here at home, not in some far-off corporate office. Number 1 in customer service. Apex Bank of Camden, Benton County's best bank. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Welcome back to Operation 7570 this morning on this Saturday around 8:30, a little bit past 8:30, may go a little bit longer today, but that's okay. Randy Lane, Betty Greer, Buddy Smothers in our studios today as we reflect back on the life and the memories we have of Ron Lane, who passed away on March the 12th, 3 weekends ago. Over 60-year broadcast veteran of local radio, both at WFWL and at WRJB. The memorial service for Ron will be tomorrow at 2 p.m. at First Baptist Church, and I think we're making plans to do that broadcast live and also have it on Facebook Live. Luke will have more information on that. But joining the conversation right now by way of phone, and he called a few moments ago and said he wanted to join in and have some things he wanted to say, and we're so glad that he's joined us today. And the man that knows these people in our studios quite well, Terry Hudson. Terry, how are you today, my friend?
Doing very well, Flash. Good morning, and really enjoying the program. I love hearing the stories about a very remarkable man, Mr. Ron Lane.
Amen.
I know on your program about 2.5 weeks ago, your Wednesday afternoon program, you had reflections, your memories of Ron, but if you want to to retell those, that's fine, or add new memories, but people may have missed that program. But your association with Ron, that goes back a long way. And what did Ron Lane mean to you, Terry Hudson?
Well, he meant so much in my life, and I credit Ron for where my career has gone over the years, where I ended up in many places. I first went to work about 1969 doing school news from Big Sandy, and had a chance to because of Mr. Mike Freeland, who was teaching down at the school at the time, and he hired me to do Big Sandy school news, and ended up getting a chance to work on weekends, and then kind of progressed from there, and became, Ron became my mentor. He would, when I was doing the morning show on WFWL, he would come in the mornings and walk in. I always remember the first thing he would do, he'd walk in the studio and he'd ask me if I had anything to report, and I would kind of bring him up to date on anything that might be going on, or just talk about different things, different music, and what I was playing on the air. But Ron was always, he had such a funny sense of humor to me. He would be very dry, and would sometimes would call me in the last few years. He would call me at night, and we would talk baseball, or we would talk about the New York Yankees, or we would talk about old radio stories. And he particularly loved to hear me talk about any stories that I had about the great John Latham.
Is there anything you can share with us right now in that regard, or would you rather not?
Well, he I told him one time, I said, I was at a meeting with John and with another guy that had worked for us a little while down in Bolivar, Tennessee, and I told Ron, I said, John and the other guy whose name was Charlie, I've lost his memory of his last name right now, but I said they got so excited talking. I said they got to eat off of each other's plates, and Ron thought that was hilarious. He said I'd love to have been a fly on the wall at that meeting. I said it was so funny just watching how they worked themselves up. And one of Ron's favorite stories that happened was when we had the radio station down in Alabama, and we had let go of an employee that had been in our sales department, and she turned around and filed a suit against us. Said we owed her some extra money, so we ended up going to trial before a judge, and I had to testify. Well, at that time, I'd never testified in a court case at all, and they called me to the stand, and I got sworn in, and they asked me my first question, and I got right into the microphone and said my name and who I was, what station I was with, and everything, and I was so close to the microphone, it was distorted, and the judge said, Mr. Hudson, if you know much about radio, you would know you don't get right into a microphone. And I said, you're correct, sir. And I told Ron about that. And I said, there went our case. We lost the case. And Ron said, I lost it right there, boys. As soon as I put my mouth on the microphone, I proved I didn't know much about radio. And he thought that was so funny.
Yeah, Ron, he enjoyed a good story, as you know. Terry, how would Ron Lane want us to remember him as we go forward with local radio now, and as we go forward in the future, as we know this is the first time in our life that we're going to have a time period without Ron, but how would Ron want us to remember him now as we go forward?
Well, Ron would want us to remember him as someone who was so important to the community, who did his best to provide a good product for the people of the Magic Valley, as it became known, and it was important to him that we put a quality product on the air all the time. And as far as news and things of this sort, live programming, we did dedications to different people. I remember we did a special salute and a special program for Thomas Rousey when he was playing for the University of Tennessee, and we did a special program for him. And it's just how Ron knew just what the people wanted to hear. I was telling somebody the other day, I guess it was you and maybe Vicky, about when Elvis died. Ron was down at the hospital in Memphis at the I believe the Baptist Hospital when they brought Elvis in, and he had passed away. And Ron said he called in and we did live reports from the hospital about what was going on at that time in 1977. So Ron was always right on top of things. He would want people to remember that he knew what small town radio was all about, and he provided a very good example for the people of Benton County and the surrounding area.
Well, Terry, I appreciate you calling us this morning, and thank you so much. Thank you for all you've meant for local radio in Camden and Benton County down through the years, and we're looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. I hate it's under those circumstances, but thank you for calling in. Have a good rest of the day, my friend.
You too. Tell everybody hello, and I'll see you tomorrow afternoon.
All right. Thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
Terry Hudson right there, and all of y'all have memories of Terry, of course, and, was he sort of wet behind the ears back in the day, Betty?
Well, weren't we all?
We all thought we knew everything in those days, didn't we? We learned quite a bit.
Listening to Terry made me think about something about Ron. You can describe him in just a few words. He loved people, he loved radio, and he loved to teach. He did have such a innate sense of knowing what needed to be done, and that's not something you learn it. You can learn it, but his wasn't a learned thing. It was automatic. Like Randy said, he taught Randy how to play baseball, and Ron couldn't run. Ron couldn't. He was on crutches at the time,
Right.
big time, and he couldn't physically get out there and teach him. Randy Lane was a heck of a baseball player.
Well, he taught me to play basketball, and he guided my career in radio as well. I think that he just innately wanted to help people, to guide people, and I think what you said, he was a teacher.
He was a teacher.
Yeah, and a lot of times when he taught you, you as the student, you observed. Ron may not have said the words, but you learned from Ron just by watching him do the things, and you picked up on what he was doing, and that wasn't always verbally, as a matter of fact. You learned from watching the man who'd done it for so long.
Yeah, he didn't just talk the game; he walked the game. He was a model, and you're right. You could watch him. He had a very playful sense of humor too.
Yeah.
I lived in L.A. for about 30 years, and we would talk weekly on the phone. Usually for about an hour, we'd talk about sports and friends, family, radio, current events, you name it. But sometimes Ron would call me up, and I would answer the phone, and he wouldn't say hello. He would break into one of his favorite Neil Diamond songs, and he would say, LA is fine, the sun shines most of the time, and the feeling is laid back. And I would just laugh, and I said, Ron Lane, what are you doing?
And back when Ron started, Betty was down there some, me not so much, because they were getting out of that habit at that particular point in time. But you would have stars, you would have Grand Ole Opry stars just to pop in, trying to promote their next record, as a matter of fact. And, people would just drop into the radio station out of the blue. Loretta Lynn, Mooney, they did it back in the day. And of course, Saturday mornings, you mentioned the gospel music programs we used to run on Saturday mornings. And sometimes if the gospel groups were in town for a gospel concert in Camden back when they traveled around so much in those days, those people might stop in early because they had such an association. They loved Camden. They loved promoters in those days. Euless, of course, John Churchwell, and those people, the Inspirations, Squire Parsons, they knew. And they would just stop in and do live on-the-spot interviews on Saturday mornings. I remember those days very well.
You never knew who was coming in. The first year I worked there was I went to work in July of 1970, and it was a political year. And like I said, I was shy and bashful, and all of the politicians came in, and my desk was right beside the door at that time, and the front door. When they come in, I looked up, and there was Ed Jones. Next thing you know, there was Al Gore, the senior. And then here they kept coming. I'm seeing all these people I've seen on the Nashville news, and the national news, and they're sitting on my desk or sitting at my desk, and it was just unreal. And Mike Freeland told me one day, he said, "Now, Betty, let me tell you something." You know how he talks. He said, "You have got to be prepared to meet anybody and everybody, and you don't ever let them intimidate you." He said, "They're in your ballpark. You tell them what you want them to know."
And I think one of the best innovations, you're talking about Mike, and of course, back I think is in 1966 when he put this show on the air, Operation 7570. The number 7570, that comes from the original radio station. That was our original number, and we still have it, 584-7570. But Mike Freeland got Mike Beloga, chemist at DuPont. Got the sponsor, Richard Hargis, up at Bank of Camden, which has still been our only sponsor on the program for so many years. And of course, with Mike, when Mike had to be away, Ron would host it some. As time evolved, I hosted it some. And then when Mike stepped away about 7 years ago, he since passed on as well. And then, we had some hosts, and then I've had it, I guess, for about 5 consecutive years now. But I think, just the innovations that those pioneers of early local radio, the innovations, Randy, that they would put in to make the show, make it, tell what's going on in the community, have an outlet, and, have people to call in and tell us what's going on with local. Because, to me, this is where we can hear on the national news, we can hear on state news, Channel 4, Channel 5, what's going on at the legislature, the Congress. But, to me, this is one of the best sources to get what's going on locally.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is that Mike Freeland was a big proponent of serving the local community, and Ron totally took that ball and ran with it too. And with all the other radio stations in Illinois and Florida and Alabama and everything that Ron was involved with, he made sure that those radio stations reflected the community as well. And what's interesting is that Ron and Mike Freeland were ahead of their time, because one of the things that we're seeing, even in big markets, even in top 10 cities today, local news and being local has become more important year after year, and it continues to be that way too. And they always serve the community here. I know that Ron did a lot of fundraisers, as you had pointed out in your article, for United Way, St. Jude's Children's Hospital, and what was it? The
Second Harvest
Second Harvest
came
Food
into
Bank.
existence here a few years ago. Yes. So just outstanding. Well, we've got other things to do, and we're going to wrap it up here. And I want to go around the room, but before we do that, Buddy, this is what Ellen Freeland sent us, and I just would like for you maybe just to read some thoughts from Ellen Freeland that she sent in regards to Ron. Of course, Mike Freeland was one of the original owners that put WFWL on the air, and Ron came to the facilities since 1959, been with us ever since at local radio. So would you just share some things that Ellen sent to us today?
Now I want to talk about
Sure,
WFWL a second. As you mentioned about Kim a while ago, it wasn't just a Benton County station, it's what we had. I remember Sunday mornings getting up, getting ready to go to Sunday school, Mom and having them have gospel music and preachers and everything on. I've told that at church a bunch of times. I won't forget that as part of my upbringing. So it didn't just mean it to Benton County, it means the surrounding area around here also. And we had an opportunity, of course, to be on the show when the station finally signed off, and that was a big day for all of us, because that was a watershed day for us. But I just want to say about it. It meant a lot, not just to hear, but in the surrounding areas. There's so much I could say about Ron. It would take a whole page probably. I think the thing that's always impressed me is that Ron never complained. No matter what the challenge, he made it head on and always came through with a smile. I'll bet that he and Mac were conducting a radio program, maybe with C.L. Barker, a man at the fair interview. No matter what, I'm sure they're talking radio. Ron was still in high school when he started reporting Big Sandy News on WFWL. He continued to work while attending Lameth College in Jackson. He could do the weekend shows. There is so much I could say about Ron, but one thing I know is that he's probably doing an interview to someone.
I think there's no doubt. Of course, C.L. Barker, he was the fair manager for so many, many years. Ron enjoyed the conversations. Of course, he had the jewelry store up here on the south side of the square, C.L. Barker and Son Jewelers, and fond memories of that man. And as you were reading that, Buddy, I've got to think, the common denominator that Ellen wrote, Russell Gallimore, Ray Smith told me this, you have pointed out today, Ron, he never complained. He never complained, always had a smile and loved people. That's the common denominator then, and never had a harsh word to say about anybody.
Something else, when I got into sales up here, I'd been in broadcasting maybe 15 years, and your brother Larry, who was one of the owners, taught me into getting into sales. He said, buddy, you know everybody. Ron would coach you along on that too. He'd coach you along. And he, that thing is, it's kind of like fishing. You're not going to catch every fish, but you establish relationships with people. And you could sit and talk to Ron. I remember we talked to a lady one day in Iowa. They had one of the chain stores around here. Ron got off the phone with her. I handed the phone to Ron and him talking. He looked at me and said, Bub, we're not going to do business there. So we didn't worry anymore. I mean, he read the situation that fast. And he said, they don't really need us. And but he did a whole lot, and it's like y'all said, common denominator, just really a good person, and it showed. My mom I used to go through cemeteries with my mom. That may sound morbid, it's not. When people look at Ron's memorial, and they think about Ron, it's going to be a real positive thing. And I just hope people pass that down to their children too.
Well, I thank all of you for being here today with us. Of course, Betty, of course, some closing comments from you.
Well, I'm just thankful that I got the opportunity to work with Ron Lane and Mike Freeland and Ellen Freeland and all of the people from there on. It was such a basis of everything else I've ever done. So Ron was good at easing you into things that you didn't know you were getting into. I think that's something he learned from Mike. And I like to pass out one day when we were on the radio and he was doing a new car showing at Ray Smith Chevrolet, and Mike traded his car, bought him a new car, traded his car in and got him a new one. And I said, is that okay with you? And he said, yeah, I've been thinking about it anyway. But, I mean, just easy peasy. Yeah. And he was a consummate teacher, and I just loved him to death. I mean, there's just no way. There's not enough words in the dictionary to say what you think about Ron Lane. I do have one more caller I want to get in before we turn it over to Randy for a last word. And Tim Smith joins us right now, and Tim's worked with us up here at WL and WRJB, and Tim's on the phone right now, and I know he's got a thought or two. Tim, thanks for getting up and sharing some thoughts. You and I go back a long way, and we've learned a lot from Ron Lane.
I have enjoyed this show immensely. I tried not to call because it's been an emotional time for me. I loved him so much, and I haven't made any social media post about it, which is something that I'll do for people that I love and stuff. Ron and I worked together back in the early 90s when I was at Murray State through the summers for 4 years. And then I took another path in life and got into the restaurant business. I made some bad decisions in my life. I went down a rocky road there, all self-inflicted. And I kind of lost myself there for a while. And I was a couple of years just not knowing what I was going to do again. And Ron ran into my dad and said, "What's Tim doing?" And Dad said, "Well, Ron, right now he's not doing anything." He said, "Tell him to come see me. I need to talk to him." And so Daddy called me on the phone and said, Ron Lane wants to talk to you. I went up there, and
This is hard.
he said, Tim, what you doing? I said, well, Ron, nothing. I'm living with the mistakes I've made. I'm sleeping in the bed that I made, and I'm not doing anything. He said, well, there's one thing about it. I won't have to train you. I won't have to babysit you. I need a sales guy to take care of about 5 counties here. I need you to sell about $50,000 a month. When do you want to start? In the morning, it would be good with me, Ronald. He said, well, let's get this thing going here. We got to get your chin up off your chest.
I'm just hearing.
And I will never, I'll just never forget the way he handled it. And I went to work there now. I went there for 11 years. I just left about the time that he phased out right here before the end of the years. He was slipping. We had a deal. He said, Jim, don't ever leave me now. I said, well, you make sure that you don't leave me up here either and retire without giving me a good heads up notice, because I got some other things I'll have to do. And he said, that's a deal. Well, as COVID came in, and he never fully came back like 5 days a week on a regular basis, but he did make that energy at him. It was 3 days a week, even if not 4 hours, whatnot. He was going to call me every morning at 9 o'clock. And then he quit coming altogether, and he called me every day at 9 o'clock. And even after he had phased himself out, and this is his grit and integrity, I love it so much. Just Terry Hudson did a great impression a while ago. He said, got anything to report? That was every day in my office right there, which was his own office at the station. And when he stayed home, he would call me, and he wasn't even on the payroll anymore with the Richardson Group. But he said, you got anything to report? And I would just sit there and talk to him every morning for about 30 minutes. It could be the Yankees. It could be Tennessee football. It could be anything. He was pure. He was a man's man. And I'm telling you, he picked me up when I was at a spot where I'm not sure how many people could have done that. He gave me my voice back, my confidence back. He never judged me for anything. I would tell him the naughtiest things I'd done, and he would grin. That was just the way he was. I'm going to tell this, Flash. Probably shouldn't, but going to. So Flash and Ron and I go to Nashville up to Fox 17 one day on a little man trip. And after we got done, I said, I'm hungry. And we're going to eat lunch. He said, where are we going, Jim? I said, we're going to Hooters. And he said, it wasn't Flash's first trip. Don't nobody fool
Hey
me.
now.
I got
Hey now.
his first time too, but we'll leave it at that. But the funny part is, he said, good, I've always heard they had great wings.
That's right.
And so we go to the one downtown on Second Avenue, and we go in and get established there, and the waitress brought our water, if you will, and I get up and go wash my hands in the restroom. The thing about it is, Flash and I had our backs to the wall. We could see the whole dining room, intentionally, of course. I came back to the restroom. Ron had taken my seat, and I was sitting with my back to everybody. Couldn't see nothing. To me, that was funny. I said, my stuff's been moved around here. He said, Jim, I've never liked going into a place with my back to everybody. I needed my back against the wall. And I'll just never forget that. And I thought, I bet you do, buddy.
Well, Tim, it's been fun. Thank you for reminiscing. We've got to get out of here. We've got to do the bargain auction. But, hey, always a pleasure to hear from you. And, hey, keep putting that good food out at Wendy's. We'll be by to see you before long, my friend.
Absolutely. I love the man a whole heck of a lot. And I've enjoyed y'all's show, and I'll see y'all tomorrow.
We look forward to that under difficult circumstances. Of course, Tim Smith right there. Of course, Tim's granddaddy, Ray Smith, bought WFWL with John Latham back around 84, 85, brought the old studios up here. And Ray, I want to make this point too. You know, there was a time WFWL and WRJB were competitors. About a 10-year period of time, they were competitors. But Ray told me, as an owner up here at WRJB at the time, he says, during that time, Ron and I were always friends. We were always friends. We had the deepest respect for each other. And when we decided to buy WFWL, no doubt who the manager was going to be. Ron was the man from day one. We wanted up here for the WFWL side, and we just, you know, the rest, of course, is history. Randy, closing thoughts from you today, my friend.
Thank you, Flash. The reason I moved back here after 30 years of living on the West Coast is for Ron. I wanted to be here for Ron, and all I can say is that I'm fortunate to have had Ron as a brother, as a friend, as a mentor, and he's been a total inspiration. Has had so much impact on my life, and as we've heard today, on the lives of many other people.
Thank you, and the memorial will be tomorrow at First Baptist Church at 2 p.m., open to the public, of course, and in case you cannot be there, it will be streamed live on Facebook, I think on the First Baptist page. We're going to pick it up on WRJB Facebook. It will be live on the airways of WRJB 95.9. Betty, we're running late, but in your capacity as a minister, could you close us on this day? Could you close us with a word of prayer, if you don't mind?
Okay. Father God, we're so thankful to have had Ron Lane in our lives, Lord. He's touched every aspect of everything we've ever done from the day we knew him. We're so thankful that we have you as our leader, and that you will be with us tomorrow during the service, be with the family, and thank you, Lord, for letting us know the man that we knew is Ron Lane. Lord, be with us and guide us in all that we do, and let us always do the things that would make him proud of us. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, that's our program today on Operation 7570. We've run a little late, but well worth the time. Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Buddy. Thank you, Betty, for being here. Thanks to Terry and to Tim for calling in. Thanks to Luke and our other studios. And as we go forth, we still want everyone to remember the Lane family in our thoughts and prayers. And we'll always remember the 6 decades that we had him with us in local Camden radio. Have a great rest of the day. We'll see you next Saturday morning.
Apex Bank of Camden is getting ready for the 15th